Good morning, Mrs. Cooke. We would like to test your connection. Could you please press your speak button, Mrs. Cooke? Mrs. Cooke, could you please press your speak button? We would like to test your connection.
Yes, I've pressed my speak button.
Okay, I think we have a technical problem. We can't see you. Your camera is not activated.
I'm pressing my speak button.
We can hear you but not see you. We are going to refresh your connection. Just a second. Mrs. Cooke, could we just test again? Could you press your speak button, please? Mrs. Cooke?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. It's fine. Thank you.
Good. Nice too. That's great.
Okay, so we resume our meeting with the second agenda item, exchange of views with Emer Cooke. I welcome Emer Cooke for the third time, I think, before the ENVI committee since the beginning of this crisis. And of course, the focus of our discussion is an update on the authorization of COVID-19 vaccines. And I guess you expect a lot of very hot questions from our members. So I give you the floor for 10 minutes, Madam Cooke, and then the floor will be to the coordinators, then the Catch the Eye. So I formally open the Catch the Eye. Please raise your hand in the room or electronically, and then it will be back to Emer Cooke. Emer Cooke, the floor is yours for 10 minutes. And I can tell you that there will be a lot of questions, so please keep time as well for your answers. Don't say everything in your first 10 minutes.
Mrs. Cooke, press your speak button, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Dear Chair, honourable members of the ENVI Committee, thank you for inviting me to update you on our work on COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics. I'll try not to cover everything in my intervention so that we have the opportunity to discuss it in more detail afterwards. I'm going to focus on new developments since my previous exchange with you on the 26th of January. I'll cover our latest scientific assessments and also the review of the cases of thromboembolic events with the AstraZeneca vaccine. So let me start just by clarifying that we now have 4 authorised vaccines in Europe, 2 mRNA, messenger RNA vaccines that I spoke about last time, and 2 adenovirus vector-based vaccines, one manufactured by AstraZeneca, which was authorised on the 29th of January, and the most recently approved Janssen vaccine, which was authorised on the 11th of March. Because it's the latest news, the Janssen vaccine showed 67% efficacy in reducing the number of symptomatic COVID-19 cases in a very large randomized clinical trial with 44,000 people. What's important, particularly important about this vaccine is it's the first vaccine authorised in the EU that can be administered as a single dose. And we understand that the first doses to be available in the EU will be delivered by the end of April. Now, I don't need to tell you that we need a wide range of different vaccines to make progress in our fight against COVID-19. We need to look at different technology platforms, different doses, schedules, storage conditions, so that we can fulfill the needs across the EU. I want to also inform you that we are also looking actively at 3 other COVID-19 vaccines. These are under rolling review. This is the Novavax, the CureVac, and Sputnik 5. Sputnik 5, or V, we're currently planning inspections of the manufacturing and clinical sites in Russia. And I take this opportunity to stress again that we are committed to applying the same standards and scrutiny to this review as to any other scientific assessments. It's also important that you're aware that vaccines are not our only focus. Monoclonal antibodies are currently among the most promising treatment options against COVID-19, and we're performing rolling reviews on 3 of these products that have been developed by Regeneron, Eli Lilly, and Celltrion. We also provided scientific opinions based on review of preliminary data on the Lilly and Regeneron monoclonal antibodies, and this has allowed a scientific opinion that can be used by member states when rolling out either emergency use or compassionate use distribution. Now, let me turn to the reports of the blood clots associated that we found following vaccination with the AstraZeneca vaccine. We became aware of a potential issue less than 2 weeks ago after some member states began reporting cases of blood clots following vaccination with the AstraZeneca vaccine. And we immediately started to investigate and collect evidence and cases from all member states. We convened a number of ad hoc meetings of our safety committee, the risk assessment committee, the PRAG, and we called on all authorities who had seen cases to present those to the committee so that our experts could review, aggregate and understand. I think it's important that you're aware that the overall cases of thromboembolic events or blood clots after vaccination is actually lower than that you would expect in the general population. So in terms of overall risk of blood clots, the expert committee concluded that there was no specific risk. But during the investigation, we began to see a small number of cases of rare, unusual, but potentially very serious clotting disorders, and some of these had a fatal outcome. And this then triggered us to take a much closer look and a much more focused review and to call urgently for additional information. Now, based on the evidence and reviewed and the cases presented as of last week, which is when we had the detailed analysis by our risk assessment committee, and really looking at all the cases, the lab results, the clinical reports, we are not in a position to definitively rule out a link between the vaccine and the cases, and we're therefore at the point that we need to launch additional investigations to understand more and also target specific observational studies. Our Safety Committee has recommended that we raise awareness of these possible risks, making sure that they're included in the product information. And drawing attention to these possible rare conditions and providing information to healthcare professionals and vaccinated people will help to spot signs or symptoms that may occur and then help manage any possible effects. Now, what we've done from a formal perspective is this warning has now been endorsed by our Human Medicines Committee, the Committee for Human Medicinal Products, and we've added in this new warning and a description of the cases in the product information of the vaccine. And this information will also be provided to healthcare professionals across the EU and to the public. We're going to communicate a targeted letter to healthcare professionals. This will also be available on our website to raise awareness of the signs and symptoms that may be of concern so that any possible action to take timely action and mitigate risk can be taken. We worked very closely with all the national medicines agencies in Europe, with experts in blood disorders, with our international regulators. I think you are aware that in the UK already somewhere in 13 million people have been administered doses of this vaccine. So they had a lot of also a lot of experience on possible side effects. So we made sure, and we were very glad to have the UK MHRA involved in our discussions. Obviously, we keep blood clotting disorders under very close observation and continue to evaluate any new cases. We have launched a specific additional studies looking at what we call real-world evidence, also laboratory testing to further investigate any possible association. And we're organising an ad hoc expert group involving people with very specialised expertise to help inform us more. We also are looking at whether the risks of these unusual blood clots might be present with other types of COVID-19 vaccines, but I need to stress that no signal has been identified from the safety monitoring so far. As you know, for all approved COVID-19 vaccines, we continue to publish monthly safety updates, summarising for the public all the evidence that has been received and assessed. Now, moving from the AstraZeneca vaccine to more general concerns about variants of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, I know that the chair of our COVID task force, Marco Cavalieri, explained last week to this committee how we are preparing to adapt the current vaccines to new variants. We published new guidance for vaccines developers on the 25th of February, which outline our data requirements for authorization. And the publication of this guidance followed the organisation of a specific meeting with other international regulators who have also taken a similar approach. And we're constantly in dialogue with the companies, the marketing authorisation holders, to help to define development plans for vaccines that can address these variants. Let me just highlight that the Commission has worked on a new delegated regulation to enable approval of adapted vaccines on the basis of a smaller set of additional data, and this is planned for publication very shortly. This new tool is part of the HERA incubator programme, which was presented to you last week by the European Commission. And this regulatory tool allows us to deliver faster assessments and to have multiple variants under the same marketing authorization as is done for the seasonal influenza vaccines. This means that with this new piece of legislation, we could be able to approve vaccines against the newly detecting variants in a matter of weeks, depending on the available data and the robustness of the information. Another important challenge that we are continuing to work on is improving the availability and supply of authorised vaccines. We have continued to work on with each of the marketing authorisation holders to look at how we can approve additional manufacturing sites and fill lines as part of the post-approval commitments. So these are the data to support them are being submitted and being examined on an ongoing and accelerated basis. We're also looking at improving the storage conditions for some of the vaccines to facilitate distribution and logistics. Now, just to focus a little bit on the communication aspects, I think the recent concerns about the AstraZeneca vaccine have demonstrated yet again how important proactive engagement with the public is so that they understand what we're doing and how we're reacting and how we're making sure that we're examining any new information in an independent manner and with all the scientists we can bring to help us understand this. We're planning to organise additional press briefings to help communicate these messages, and we will have a third public meeting on the 26th of March, which will provide an update to EU citizens about the continued assessment activities and the safety monitoring of the 4 vaccines, as well as the impact of variants. At this meeting, we'll also have colleagues from the European Centre for Disease Control who will also talk about the expected impact of the vaccines at community level. Trust and confidence in what we do is paramount to the fight against COVID-19, and we need to continue to deliver on our transparency initiatives. I'm pleased to inform you that earlier this month we published the first sets of clinical data underpinning the marketing authorizations for the Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines. As you know, this is an initiative of unprecedented transparency that started in the EU, and EMA and Health Canada are the only 2 regulators in the world that apply this level of transparency. Before I conclude, I want to further reflect on the experience with the recent events around the AstraZeneca vaccine, and really to highlight that this is not an unexpected situation. When you vaccinate millions of people, it's inevitable that rare or serious instances of illnesses will be detected after vaccine. And the role of us in the European regulatory system is to rapidly detect such incidences, investigate them, and figure out whether they're associated with the vaccines or not. We have to continue to not to lose sight of the fact that vaccines will help us to control this pandemic. We see already early observational studies particularly from Israel and UK, which indicate that infection rates are falling and that the spread of the disease can be reduced when vaccination levels in the population are high. I want to reassure you and the public, the citizens of Europe, that there is a control system in place to ensure that the vaccines that we all receive are safe, efficacious and of high quality. We will keep monitoring their safety and effectiveness, and whenever new evidence becomes available, we will rapidly assess whether there's any need for a change in the product information, any need to inform the public, any need to update our healthcare professionals. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to go into more depth on some of these questions.
Okay, thank you. So we start with the coordinators, and then there is a long list of speakers for the Catch the Eye. So Emer Cooke, you will have 2 additional slots, okay, to answer the questions, first after the coordinators and then after the Catch the Eye. So we start with the EPP and Peter Liese, and please stick to the 2 minutes for the coordinators, otherwise we risk not to make it. Peter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Emer Cooke. So I switch on my camera, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have it. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Emer Cooke. We need to vaccinate much faster than in the previous weeks, but at the same time, we need safety. Thank you for your reassurance on Sputnik. I think we need a scientific procedure. I don't exclude that this is a safe vaccine, but there are many question marks how the data have been generated. So follow your scientific line. My question is, what is the timeline on Sputnik? When can you give approval or not give approval? Second point, we need to use the vaccines that we have more efficient. Thank you for approving the 6th dose of BioNTech, but I'm sure we need to go further. I personally saw that it's possible to draw 7 doses from 1 vial of BioNTech, and it is possible also to get 11 doses from Moderna. So what needs to be done? How can we help you with the companies to make this happen so that more people can be vaccinated faster? Third point, there is a publication in the New England Journal of Medicine that people that went through the disease are protected in the same level as if they got vaccinated. So could you work on scientific advice that these people maybe get an updated vaccine in summer, but they don't need to be vaccinated as a priority now? And I even saw some publication that there may be a link with the side effects of AstraZeneca when you went through the disease. What is your knowledge about this? And last point on AstraZeneca. Personally, I don't think it was a completely bad decision what happened in France, so that you give AstraZeneca more to people above 55. And is this an option that you examine, especially because younger women are affected more with the side effects of the venous vein thrombosis? So what is your assessment now after some days more? Could it be a recommendation to give young women especially another vaccine? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. We move to SND and Jutta Gutteland.
Sorry, we can't hear you. You have to...
She's back, or? Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Executive Director Cooke, for being here. I would also like to start by saying that you have a big support for making sure that we are authorizing safe and effective vaccines, and also what you mentioned about making sure that we have the studies about vaccine being safe. It is important that we continue, because it will have a big effect for people's health that we are going through with its vaccine programs in the member states. But in the light of the reported blood clotting incidents of AstraZeneca, and also following the confirmation last Thursday that the vaccine is safe and effective, I would like you to elaborate a bit more on the reporting of adverse effects progressing when it comes to AstraZeneca and also other vaccines. I would like to hear more about what we have there. And my second question concerns the follow-up on the long-term effectiveness on vaccines, especially relevant now in the legislative proposal on the digital green certificate. Can you tell us anything about how the vaccine monitoring platform is progressing? And my third and last question concerned the variation framework. Since the delegated act concerning the examination of variation to the terms of marketing authorization from medicinal products for human use and medical products has been delayed, how will that affect your work for adapted vaccines in relation to new variants and mutations? Thank you.
Thank you. Véronique Riel-Lenoir pour Renew.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Madame la Directrice, je souhaite tout d'abord saluer le travail considérable de l'Agence européenne des médicaments et de ses experts. Merci d'être les garants de l'efficacité et de la sécurité des vaccins administrés aujourd'hui aux Européennes et aux Européens. J'ai beaucoup de questions à vous poser en 2 minutes. Premièrement, sur l'autorisation d'urgence de mise sur le marché. La Commission évoque cette hypothèse. Pouvez-vous nous préciser quelle serait concrètement la différence entre une autorisation conditionnelle et une autorisation d'urgence, en particulier en termes de partage des responsabilités juridiques? S'agissant de Sputnik, je partage la question qui vous a été déjà posée sur le calendrier d'autorisation. La Russie a-t-elle déjà introduit auprès de vous des demandes d'homologation de sites de production sur le territoire européen? S'agissant des effets secondaires des vaccins, comment et quand l'Agence européenne du médicament identifie-t-elle les effets secondaires d'un vaccin au cours de l'autorisation temporaire? C'est une question très importante si l'on prend l'exemple d'AstraZeneca. Une fois identifiés, ces effets secondaires et leurs conséquences restent-ils sous la responsabilité des industriels? Enfin, concernant l'homologation de nouveaux sites de production par l'Agence européenne du médicament, pouvez-vous nous indiquer si les entreprises pharmaceutiques coopèrent pleinement avec l'agence, si des progrès ont pu être observés depuis mi-février dans votre certification de lignes supplémentaires, et en particulier, pourriez-vous nous indiquer si l'Agence européenne du médicament envisage d'octroyer cette semaine l'homologation à AstraZeneca pour l'utilisation officielle d'un second site de production en Europe, plus précisément aux Pays-Bas. Merci beaucoup pour vos réponses.
Merci. We move to Silvia Saldone for ID.
Grazie Presidente. I cittadini europei hanno la sensazione che la Commissione europea e l'Agenzia europea del farmaco siano lenti nel rispondere alle urgenze ed esigenze di questa pandemia. I numeri sono impietosi, solo il 12% sono i vaccinati nell'Unione europea. Da tempo noi chiediamo più velocità e più chiarezza sulla strategia vaccinale. L'Europa è indietro in maniera anche imbarazzante, possiamo dire, rispetto agli altri paesi, anche per alcuni ritardi nell'approvazione dei vaccini. Io chiedo quindi al direttore esecutivo dell'EMA ulteriori chiarimenti su AstraZeneca. La Francia, per esempio, lo ha bloccato per gli under 55 e alcuni paesi ancora lo tengono in sospeso. Vorrei sapere che cosa sta succedendo. I cittadini sono piuttosto perplessi su questo vaccino, o meglio, sono costantemente bombardati da informazioni contrastanti che francamente non aiutano. Com'è possibile poi che nel momento in cui i paesi bloccavano AstraZeneca, in audizione in commissione EMA dicesse che andava tutto bene? Vorrei capire anche questo. Vorrei anche delle spiegazioni su Sputnik. 50 paesi lo hanno autorizzato e 18 lo stanno utilizzando tranquillamente senza particolari problemi. Perché in Europa ci sono tutti questi ritardi nell'approvarlo? Perché il commissario Breton dice, lo abbiamo letto tutti, che non abbiamo bisogno del vaccino Sputnik? C'è la sensazione, francamente, purtroppo, che ci siano ragioni geopolitiche dietro questa scelta. Come procedono inoltre le valutazioni su altri vaccini, come per esempio Novavax? Quanto ci vorrà per la decisione finale? Insomma, anche EMA, come la Commissione, dovrebbe dare delle spiegazioni e dimostrare di saper rispondere velocemente alle urgenze di questo drammatico momento di pandemia. Grazie.
Thank you. We move to the Greens and TMS.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Dear Mrs. Cooke, thank you for this update. Before jumping to my questions, I would like to thank the EMA's effort for transparency in the review process of COVID-19 medicines and vaccines, as the clinical trial data of Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are now publicly available online. I hope these transparency efforts will continue for other vaccines being authorized. Now, as my colleagues and I, we are worried about the consequences of the suspension in many member states of the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine. It clearly delays the process of vaccination, and I would like to have your opinion on how the coordinated process of pharmacovigilance could be improved to react sooner and have a better coordinated approach in these cases. Furthermore, you mentioned in your assessment that you would continue your investigation on the events of blood clots and especially possibly correlation with other factors. I would like to know when you expect to be able to really update us on this. For example, if it's true that young women are more affected and if it could also be related to smoking and contraception, for example. As said many times, it is important that citizens have all the facts to strengthen the trust in our vaccination strategy, and safety should come first. And on that point, it is not clear how the so-called booster shots will work. For example, if you get a vaccine A, but it appears that it is not efficient against some variants, could you then get a booster shot coming from a vaccine B to enhance your protection? And if that not, does that mean that people will have to wait for booster shots coming from the first vaccine they receive? Can you please explain what are your recommendations on this point, and how will you assess the data to provide the highest safety in light of what I shared? Finally, when will we have all the data on vaccine efficiency and lengths of protection, as it is clearly related? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move to ECR and Alexander Vondra.
Thank you, Pascal, very much. Thank you, Emma, for your performance. I believe that the decision by several member states to suspend the use of AstraZeneca was a mistake for two reasons. First, while vaccination were temporarily paused to investigate a small risk of blood clotting, people continued to contract COVID, and given the prevalence of the disease across Europe, it is unacceptable to see delays in vaccination that would have minimized the deaths and suffering. And secondly, the doubts raised by this pause in the vaccine rollout are likely to persist and undermine the acceptance rates in Europe. This was illustrated in a YouGov poll published just yesterday, which revealed that over half of the people in France, Germany, and Spain now believe AstraZeneca vaccine is unsafe. So I do have three questions to you. First, given that the events of the past week appear to put politics over science, what can EMA do to put science back at the forefront and reassure Europe's citizens that AstraZeneca is safe and facilitate a much-needed increase in vaccination rates? Secondly, the other example of politics over science approach may be seen around debates over the Sputnik V vaccine. You mentioned the EMA's inspection of Russia's production facilities next month. Should I understand this plan that EMA, in its future authorization process, may differentiate between the Sputnik licensed production inside the EU on one hand and its production in Russia's facilities, where concerns were raised about the quality and safety of the production? And thirdly, whether you can amuse us a bit more when we may expect the authorization of Novavax. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last coordinator, Silvia Modig, for the left.
Thank you very much, Pascal. Thank you, Mrs. Cooke, for your presentation and for the work that you have been doing. Many of the questions I wanted to raise have been raised by colleagues, so I thank them for that, and I will not repeat them. I will start by saying that it has now proven that the choice to go with the very broad portfolio of vaccines, it has proven to be the right choice. I would also like to hear on your estimates on when possibly there would be enough information for you to possibly make a decision on the marketing authorization of Sputnik 5, but also the estimated timetable for Novavax and CureVac also is really interesting. So if you could elaborate that. Safety and trust are the issues here. The vaccine has to be so safe as they possibly can be ensured to be, but the trust of the people come also from open communication. So I very welcome your thoughts on improving open communication with the public, because that is essential. The Sputnik vaccine, it has a geopolitical altitude, but I think that EMA and us should proceed with the medical facts first. Same rules, same evaluation, same obligations, same rights. So that's that. But then, Mrs. Cooke, the Commission has now proposed thoughts on how the vaccine certificate could work, the green card. I would like to hear your view on that. From the position of EMA, from the medical authorities' perspective, what is the minimum requirements that we need to collect from the vaccine data from different countries, so that we are in the position where we know how to boost the vaccines in case of a new, more dangerous variant or other situations like this? So what is the minimum requirement that is medical essential info that we need? That would be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you. So back to you, Emer Cooke, for 7 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Mrs. Cooke?
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we cannot see you. We are going to refresh your connection. Mrs. Cooke, try again. Press your speak button, please. Mrs. Cooke?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, and apologies. We seem to be having technical difficulties today. I don't know why it's happening today. Thank you very much for all the questions and the interest and the support. It's very valuable to have you as members of the ENVI committee helping us interpret what you're hearing from the public and helping us to make sure that we have the right answers. Let me start with the doses first. Firstly, as you know, for the Pfizer vaccine, we did approve an additional 6 doses, and Dr. Lisa has said that it is sometimes possible to get 7 doses. I think that's very important information. But to be able for us to put that in the label, it would mean that we would have to be sure that we could consistently get 7 doses in every vial. And that requires specific syringes. It requires excellent technique from the administrator. So at this stage, we don't have that information. But if it is for those excellent administrators who can get 7 doses, I hope they will continue to do so. And just to say, a similar situation is happening with the Moderna vaccine. We are expecting to receive a package of data that shows that it is possible to get consistently, provided you have the right technique and syringes, 11 doses out of the 10-dose vial. And I can also tell you that there are plans to increase the fill volume, which will allow additional doses to be. It will be additional fill, which means that additional doses will be available. I want to then come to the discussions on the AstraZeneca and the possible risk of clotting. And just to say, yes, that the majority of the events we have seen have been in women under 55. But in fact, this seems to be the population who has mostly received the vaccines, the AstraZeneca vaccines in Europe. So it's impossible for us to determine that that is really a population at highest risk. But this is part of the ongoing investigation. And as we have additional information on what on the age stratification of the events and the gender stratification, we'll be able to have a better view on this. And this is exactly what's happening. These are the questions that are going to be addressed in the ad hoc expert group that we've set up to deal with that. Maybe while I'm on the subject of pharmacovigilance and the request to as to what we can do to speed up the process, I just want to assure you that we are really doing everything we can to make sure we get the information as quickly as possible, and that we don't just rely on the spontaneous reports that are coming into the pharmacovigilance system, but we're launching dedicated studies to specifically investigate for these problems. So once we see there may be a potential issue, then not only do we try to ensure that that we examine all the spontaneous reports, but we also look at whether we can study this in more specifically through observational and real-world studies. So all the issues like, is there a link with smoking? Is there a link with oral contraceptives? These are things that we have to have the information. We have to have the collection of information there before we can draw these conclusions. And unfortunately, it's not an instant process. We need to, they're not easy answers. If they were easy answers, we would give them to you already. But actually, these are things that you need to carefully look at before you draw any conclusions. And it takes a little time. It takes the science, it takes time. Maybe then coming back to the situation on the different recommendations that have been taken. I just want to really highlight the role of the European Medicines Agency and what we do. So our job is to give a scientific opinion on the safety, quality and efficacy of the vaccines that we've seen based on the information that it's in the files or we collect subsequently. So we can then say that the vaccine is safe, what population it works in, and that it continues to be of high quality. Our job is to give the governments a scientific basis on which to make their decisions, but we don't know what vaccines are available in the different member states. We don't know how they've been rolled out. We don't know what populations have been looked at so far. So it is possible that member states will will have different recommendations as new information is becoming available. I want to then talk a bit about Sputnik and to again assure you that we are evaluating this vaccine in the same way that we have evaluated all the other vaccines that have submitted information to us. If there is we can only evaluate on the basis of data that we have. So if there's a need for additional data, which in this case we still have some additional questions that the company needs to supply us with, we have to wait for that data to be submitted by the companies before we can evaluate, and that's sometimes where some of the delays take place. But we take this job very seriously, and we can only issue a recommendation based on the information we have in the dossiers, and we urge the companies to provide us with that information as quickly as possible. Just to elaborate then a little bit on, because I think this is linked to the cooperation with the companies and whether everybody is doing all they can to increase production. And I just want to say that we are working very, very hard on this at the moment. But again, if we're going to approve an additional site for the manufacture of a specific vaccines, we have to do that on the basis of confidence that the site is able to consistently manufacture a quality product at that site, and generating the data to support that does take some time. So we have to wait for that to be generated for us to be able to come to a conclusion. Just to come back to the question on the variation regulation and on the variants. It's true that the variation regulation, the updated variation regulation, has not been published, but the companies still need time to generate the data. So we're not worried that this will have an impact on the approval of the variants when and if that becomes necessary. Just to come back to the questions on on science again, yes, we have to consistently assure you and the public that science is at the forefront of what we do. While we're working as rapidly as we can, we have to make sure that we still base our conclusions on scientific evidence and scientific evidence in which we have confidence. So this does mean that we are constantly engaging with companies. We're constantly engaging to get additional data, that if there's any doubts or concerns, we make sure that we rule these out. And this leads me to the request from a number of honourable members about the timeframes for when approval would be possible. So at this stage, for all of the products, the vaccines that are in rolling review, and as I mentioned at the start here, we have 3 vaccines in rolling review. So that's the Sputnik 5, the Novavax, and the CureVac. The fact that they're still in rolling review means that we're not yet in a position to say when we expect. We haven't put a timetable for when the actual authorization would be expected, because the evidence is still being generated. In some cases, the trials have not been either the trials have not been completed or the production information is not yet available. I do want to come back to one of the honourable speakers' point to confirm that we did authorise the Janssen vaccine on the 11th of March, so very recently. But supplies of the Janssen vaccine for Europe are not expected to be available until sometime in April. Yeah, and then maybe finally to come back to the request on the certification and the green card that is being rolled out by the European Commission. I just want to stress that we're working closely with the European Centre for Disease Control and the European Commission on this. To really try and determine what is the most important information that would help to inform the rollout of this certification. And I think there was also a reference to the vaccine monitoring platform that the ECDC is responsible for. And we are working again. This is something where I think there's been a great cooperation and integration possible. We are working and looking at the information that is put into this vaccine platform to help us then review what is necessary for the ongoing safety and effectiveness of the vaccines that are on the market. So this gives us real-life evidence. It gives us the quantities of vaccines rolled out so that we can put in perspective what we're seeing from our pharmacovigilance and other studies.
Thank you. So we move to the Catch the Eye, and I will close the list in a couple of seconds. I have 13 speakers. Let's start with Nathalie Collin-Osterley for the EPP. And I recall that you have 1 minute each.
Oui, vous m'entendez?
Oui, on vous entend. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Oui, merci beaucoup. J'aurais voulu poser quelques questions à Madame Cooke. Effectivement, on l'a dit, l'Union européenne est très critiquée sur la lenteur en matière de lenteur de vaccination et d'approbation. Une question a été posée sur la procédure d'urgence et j'aurais voulu savoir exactement en quoi celle-ci consistait. Par ailleurs, on a vu avec AstraZeneca que les États membres suspendaient sans aucune coordination la vaccination, contrairement à ce que disait l'agence, à ce que préconisait l'Agence européenne du médicament. Donc, quelles explications pouvez-vous nous donner par rapport à cela, parce que cela retarde évidemment la vaccination et cela impacte la confiance des citoyens européens. Aujourd'hui, nous avons eu une information. Selon le régulateur américain, AstraZeneca a pu utiliser des données obsolètes lors des essais cliniques aux USA. J'aurais voulu avoir votre réaction par rapport à cela. Et enfin, concernant les objectifs d'immunité collective, 70% de la population adulte d'ici l'été devrait pouvoir être vaccinée. Ces objectifs sont-ils toujours d'actualité au vu de la circulation des variants? Je vous remercie.
Merci. For SND, César Luena.
Gracias, Pascal. Bueno, pues AstraZeneca en el ojo del huracán, por un lado el riesgo de embolia, por otro el incumplimiento de los plazos de entrega están poniendo en serios problemas para cumplir con los objetivos de vacunación. Llegado el caso, le pregunto a la señora Cooke, aquellos ciudadanos que hayan recibido una primera dosis de AstraZeneca, ¿podrían recibir una segunda dosis de otra vacuna? En relación con los riesgos de embolia, ha dado muchas explicaciones. Yo le pregunto si la EMA puede ya determinar si hay relación de estas embolias con patologías anteriores. Tercero, Sputnik 5, también de moda. Italia va a producir esta vacuna, según se ha informado. La agencia no ha autorizado su comercialización. Entonces, señora Cooke, si algún Estado miembro aprueba su uso en su territorio, ¿qué mecanismos tiene la agencia de colaboración, de control, para trabajar con las agencias nacionales? Y, por último, En relación con las nuevas variantes, que también ha hablado, las secuencias genómicas que deben hacerse de al menos un 5% de los casos positivos, pero yo no sé si los Estados miembros, algunos tienen esa capacidad. Entonces, ¿qué papel tiene la EMA para identificar las nuevas variantes? ¿Es suficiente ese 5%? Y, por último, ¿qué porcentaje utilizan Estados Unidos, Brasil, India, que son también países que tienen altos índices de contagios? Gracias, Pascal.
Thank you. We move to Renew, Nicolas Stefanotin.
Je te remercie, Pascal. Mrs. Cooke, can you explain more the statement that there are benefits that outweigh the risk? And when you do this statement, if there are other aspects taken into consideration when you do the assessment, beside the incidence of allergic reactions or suspicious death? Secondly, there are further studies that have been published on the efficacy for people with immunodeficiencies or chronic disease or pregnant women. And I wonder if EMA can provide specific recommendations for vaccine rollout in light of recent studies. And thirdly, if there's more data on immunity developed after having the disease, if this can be integrated in the recovery certificate, if we know more about it. I think Peter Liese asked a similar question, because there is a big lack of clarity as regards the recovery certificate. There's only a maximum period that it can be valid for, but we know not more at this moment about it. Thank you.
Thank you. For ID, Simona Baldassare.
Grazie Presidente. Direttrice Cook, lei ha dichiarato da un lato che il vaccino non può essere associato a un incremento degli eventi di trombosi, dall'altro che non si può ancora escludere definitivamente un legame tra questi casi rari di trombosi e effetti indesiderati e il vaccino. Sarà d'accordo che queste affermazioni sono quantomeno contraddittorie. Infatti rimangono anche dubbi circa le trombosi del seno venoso cerebrale. Dopo circa 1,6 milioni di vaccinazioni AstraZeneca in Germania ci si attendeva un solo caso di trombosi del seno venoso, ne sono stati segnalati 7. Dobbiamo capire la relazione tra la somministrazione del vaccino AstraZeneca e i diversi fattori protrombotici. Penso per esempio alla pillola anticoncezionale, utilizzata da circa il 21% della popolazione femminile europea in età fertile, oppure ai fattori genetici, come per esempio il fattore quinto di Leiden, presente almeno nel 4% della popolazione. Non sono numeri da sottovalutare, specialmente quando si punta a vaccinare il 70% della popolazione entro l'autunno. A riguardo, l'EMA che cosa sta facendo? Quale strategia di farmacovigilanza sta mettendo in atto? È necessario anche che i dati raccolti durante la campagna omogenea siano messi a disposizione in tempo reale e in forma omogenea. Grazie.
Thank you. We move to the Greens. Jutta Paulus.
Ms. Cooke, thanks for being with us and for being patient with all these difficult questions. I would like to inquire once more about Sputnik. Could you give us a timeline when the EMA can actually give an approval or not approval of the vaccine? Because I think this would be very important for a number of member states. And secondly, I would like to know what's happening here? I would like to know, is there any data on sterile immunity which was handed in by AstraZeneca or any of the other vaccine developers? We know from the data in Israel and UK that BioNTech Pfizer seems to provide a sterile immunity in those people that have been vaccinated, and this of course would be very important for disrupting the infection chains. Do we have any knowledge there? Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We move to ECR, Margarita Della Pisa.
Perché lei ha fatto delle dichiarazioni contraddittorie totalmente.
Hola, buenos días, señora Cook. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí respondiendo a nuestras inquietudes. Hay muchas esperanzas puestas en la vacuna. Sin embargo, no podemos olvidar que existen personas que enferman y mueren hoy por coronavirus. Hacen falta también tratamientos. Nos ha comentado al principio de su intervención sobre el buen resultado de los anticuerpos. ¿Nos puede decir sobre retrovirales si ha avanzado algo en ellos? Pienso en la necesidad de un tratamiento de administración oral que pueda proporcionarse a los pacientes que todavía no están hospitalizados para evitar que caigan en un cuadro más grave, sobre todo en pacientes con factores de predisposición. Por otro lado, ¿puede afectar el bajo ritmo de vacunación a un desarrollo indeseado de variantes que no sean sensibles a las vacunas? ¿Tiene recomendaciones en este sentido? Ya que la vacuna no solamente tiene interés de proporcionar inmunidad individual, sino también colectiva. Por último, sobre las reacciones autoinmunes. ¿Sabe algo sobre efectos secundarios de este tipo? Está claro que no es fácil porque serían efectos secundarios que aparecerían más a largo plazo. Pero bueno, no sé si sobre este tema tendría algo de información que proporcionarme. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. For the left, Mikolas.
Thanks, Pascal, and thanks, Emer, for your presentation. The chair of EMA's management board recently compared the unilateral emergency approval of the Sputnik V vaccine by certain member states who don't want to wait for EMA's approval to playing Russian roulette. She said she would strongly advise against a national emergency authorisation. But the 2001 directive on medicinal products for human use permits member states to bypass EMA and avail of the emergency use authorisation. As we know, the UK are using it. And I asked you back in January about the UK using it, and you didn't criticise the UK approach or compare and contrast the UK and EU approval processes. Now, the company that produces Sputnik has asked the EMA official to apologise publicly. The company said the chair's comments raised serious questions about possible political interference in the ongoing EMA review. Do you agree the approval process should be based on efficacy and safety in terms of health outcomes and not geopolitics? And surely Thierry Breton's comments, who seems to have a problem with the vaccine just because it's Russian, given that we've only vaccinated 12% of the people in Europe, do you think this was unhelpful? Thanks very much.
Thank you. We move back to the EPP and Susanna Glavak.
Mrs. Glavak, press your speak button, please. Hello? Could you speak, please?
Yeah. Mrs. Glavak, can you please speak now? Thank you. You just have to press the speak button once and then you're live. Thank you. Mrs. Glavak, we're going to refresh your connection.
Yeah,
thank you.
Let's move to another member. So we move to Nicolás Casares for SND.
Gracias, Pascal. Gracias. Gracias, Mr. Cooke, por este continuo diálogo que tiene y darle las gracias también por la rápida respuesta en la cuestión de AstraZeneca. Y si todo va bien, parece ser que podremos tener hasta 7 vacunas en unos meses, pero bueno, vamos a ver. Tengamos paciencia. Me gustaría preguntarle por una noticia que ha aparecido hoy sobre nuevos datos que la Agencia Americana para la Seguridad y el Control de Alergias y Enfermedades Infecciosas ha puesto sobre la mesa. Dice que hay datos, está preocupada porque hay datos que están fuera de tiempo en los trials presentados por AstraZeneca. ¿Tiene conocimiento de esto? Hoy mismo el instituto que dirige el doctor Fauci ha hecho esta aseveración. Por otro lado, también me gustaría saber si, derivado del aumento de producción de vacunas, se están produciendo algunos desabastecimientos o contemplan que se produzcan en algunos medicamentos esenciales para el tratamiento de pacientes en Europa. Esto también está ocurriendo ya en otros sitios y creo que Pfizer ha lanzado algunas alertas en otros países. Quiero saber si esto está ocurriendo aquí. Por último, decir que me alegro por su respuesta de las 7 dosis, Creo que no debemos regalarle cada ciertos meses dinero a una compañía para las enfermeras. Tiene que ser por la producción adaptada de la compañía farmacéutica. Gracias.
Thank you. We move to Renew and Maria Rodriguez Soraya Ramos.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Gracias, presidente. Y gracias también a la señora Cook por sus continuadas comparecencias ante esta comisión. Creo que el ejercicio de transparencia es lo mejor que podemos hacer en estos momentos. Quisiera reiterar tres temas, tres preguntas. La primera, en relación a los centros de producción de vacunas. Hay una sensación y una realidad que la producción de vacunas en la Unión Europea, en territorio europeo, va mucho más lento de lo esperado y con cierta ansiedad vemos que no tenemos las dosis que habíamos programado para el objetivo del 70% de inmunización. En este sentido, quisiera saber cómo está el proceso de nueva autorización de plantas de producción en Europa, ya que este seguimiento debe ser también revisado por la EMA. En segundo lugar, en relación al certificado de vacunación europea, que me gustaría que nos dijera cómo hemos avanzado en los efectos de inmunización que tienen las distintas vacunas, porque este es un elemento clave para que el certificado de vacunación pueda operar de forma efectiva. Y también, por lo tanto, cuánto tiempo dura esta inmunización, si nos evita del contagio o no, y cuándo deben realizarse dosis de recuerdo. ¿Cómo estamos en este tema? Y en tercer lugar, respecto a AstraZeneca.
Thank you. Sorry. Marco Drotto for ID.
Grazie Presidente, ringrazio anche la direttrice. Ometto alcune domande ovviamente perché sono già state poste da colleghi e non mi occuperò neanche di aspetti legati alla sanità perché per competenza l'ha già fatto la dottoressa Baldassarre. Evidenzio però, mi dica se sbaglio, che i tempi di approvazione dell'EMA sono stati decisamente più lunghi di quelli dell'FDA statunitense e mi chiedo evidentemente quale sia stata la causa e chiedo a lei se per caso sia stata la burocrazia. E le chiedo anche come si potrebbe in futuro prevenire questi tempi lunghi, anche perché l'efficienza di questi processi potrebbe essere utile qualora Stati nazionali come ad esempio ha già anticipato l'Italia, che ricordo dove esiste un sistema eccellente di produzione farmaceutica, e questi Stati intendano, dicevo, avviare una propria produzione che penso si riterrà indispensabile. Grazie.
Thank you. We try again, Susanna Glavak.
Mrs. Glavak, press your speak button, please.
I hope so. You hear me now. Did you hear me now?
Hear you. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Pascal, and thank you, Mrs. Cook, for joining us today's debate. Thank you for your hard work. I have several questions. Did the Chinese initiate approval of any of their vaccines? Do you have any communication with the member states that are using Russian and Chinese vaccines on the data concerning the vaccination and side effects? Did they deliver any data so far? Do we have numbers that show which vaccine, Astra, Pfizer and others, produced most side effects and in which population? And I would like just to say that I fully support the open communication and transparency of EMA with media, which is, I think, crucial in these times. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We move to SND and Sarah Cerdas.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again. I have just a few questions for the Director. What are the risks of introducing vaccines without EMA approval into a member state of the European Union? And is EMA collecting data on this vaccination process? Could this help Could this be used to help improve the assessment of EMA market authorization? So here I'm thinking, of course, about Hungary and Sputnik. And secondly, you said that the timeline is not possible for you to give us a timeline in regards to, because you're evaluating the data on the 3 vaccines. So I would like to know, when will this evaluation be available? Meaning, when will you be able to provide us a timeline for when these vaccines could be approved? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last question will be from the Greens, Michel Rivasi.
Madame
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Madame Cooke, d'être là parmi nous. Alors moi, j'ai une question sur le fait que AstraZeneca a été autorisé par l'EMA, mais pas par la FDA aux États-Unis. Pourquoi? On parle de données obsolètes sur l'efficacité. On dit que la FDA a demandé des études complémentaires à AstraZeneca. Alors, expliquez-nous la différence d'évaluation entre l'organisme européen et la FDA américaine. Deuxième chose, dans les vaccins qui existent, notamment les 4 qui sont autorisés à l'heure actuelle, c'est lesquels qui résistent mieux aux variants? Quand je parle de variants, je parle du variant anglais, du variant de l'Afrique du Sud, du variant du Brésil. Est-ce que Pfizer et Moderna ont une meilleure efficacité vis-à-vis de ces variants qu'AstraZeneca, qui a été qui n'est pas utilisé en Afrique du Sud parce qu'il résiste moins aux variants d'Afrique du Sud? Et au niveau des traitements, est-ce que vous avez un avis sur les traitements à l'heure actuelle vis-à-vis du coronavirus? Merci.
Thank you. So the floor is yours, Emer Cooke. I guess you have up to 11:10 or 11:15, so make the most of it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm going to group my responses into various topics because there were a number of issues that were raised that are connected in some way. So let me first take the perception of delays in approval and whether it would be useful to have an emergency use authorization at a European level. I think it's very important to understand that we can only give an approval once we have the data available. And what in Europe, we have been using a conditional marketing authorization, which is a more stringent approach and rigorous approach than the emergency use authorizations that a number of other countries have done. And it is true that this possibility exists at a national level and that some member states are using it. It's very difficult for us to comment on the information that the member states have got to support any emergency use because we don't have that information. But of course, we're more than happy if that can be shared with us and can help us come to an overall science-based conclusion. So I would I stress that the possibility of emergency use does exist in the European legislation at the moment. It is at a member state level, and if we can get valuable information from any use at member state level, then we should use it, and that's a responsibility we have of as a scientific body to make sure that we're basing our conclusions based on the best and most up-to-date scientific evaluation. And while I'm on the subject of emergency use authorization, there is also a proposal proposal as part of the HERA incubator to introduce the possibility of a European-wide emergency use authorization, but this is still at a relatively early stage in development. I think it goes without saying that what I'm trying to convey here is that we cannot comment on something where we don't have the information. I think the other thing that I want to stress is that we don't necessarily get the application at the same time. The companies don't submit at the same time across the world. So part of what we're doing from the European agency perspective is to try to understand why companies are submitting to us later. Are they submitting different information? And is that why it takes longer? And I have an example from one of the recent applications where the company said it took them about 2 weeks longer because they needed to include additional manufacturing sites and they needed to generate data to support those additional manufacturing sites, and those weren't included in the application for emergency use authorization in the US, for example. So that's just to, this isn't the case for all, but it is just an example of some of the things that may contribute to the time that we take. If we have to look at 5 different manufacturing sites as opposed to 2 different manufacturing sites, that's going to take us a bit longer. There was a question also about manufacturing sites, and I have to say that at this point of the pandemic and the rollout of vaccines, we have to do everything in our collective power to make sure we have as much manufacturing and manufacturing capability to increase, to make sure that the production of vaccines can be increased, because that's what's going to impact the rollout across Europe. We are working on, the companies are working very hard to look at additional manufacturing sites, because maybe the initial site didn't have the capacity to meet the demand. And we, as soon as the information becomes available that it is of the same quality from that site, we will approve it within days. That's our commitment. With respect to the question on thromboembolic events and the events in the general population versus these rare clotting disorders such as the DICT and CVST, what I said was that the overall rate of thromboembolic disorders in vaccinated individuals is reported is lower than in the general population. But what we did see as part of this increased vigilance is that there is a small a cluster of rare, unusual side events where the occurrence seems to be higher, and these are also the type of clotting disorders that you also find in some COVID patients. So you might also people who've had COVID before might be susceptible to these same events. And we need additional studies. We need additional investigation to determine whether there is a correlation with smoking, whether there is a correlation with oral contraceptives, the effects on immunocompromised people, the effects on pregnancy. These are ongoing, the investigations are ongoing, but I'm not able to definitively tell you what the situation is on these populations for the moment. I want to come back to a question that has come up a couple of times, and that's with respect to the US status. So I am interpreting the question on as relating to the recent interim results that have just come out in the US on the AstraZeneca vaccine which again show very promising efficacy and safety from a larger population, which also includes, I think it's 25% over 65. So we were waiting. We knew that this clinical trial was ongoing, but at the time when we did our assessment of the AstraZeneca vaccine, that trial had not reported any interim conclusions. So yes, there is new information available. It's very promising information. It's consistent with what we assessed, and in fact, it's showing even greater efficacy. At least what we're reading now is that we can expect that the trials point to greater efficacy than what we actually observed in the previous trials that we examined. So that just to really point to the fact that this is a continuous exercise. There is new information coming out all the time. It does affect how confident we are in the vaccines. This is very, very, the new information from the US trial is actually very much welcomed, and the company has promised to provide us with it, and we will adjust our assessment if needed, if there's any new information that needs to be taken into account. Yeah, back to Sputnik and the concerns, the many concerns that the honourable members have raised. I just have to come back to my initial statement that we are looking at the Sputnik 5 vaccine. We have been in discussions with the company who's representing the fund who developed the vaccines. We have accepted a rolling review from on the Sputnik vaccine. We are in the process of evaluating. We are in the process of organising inspections. We do hope that this will be a valuable vaccine to add to the vaccines that are available from the European population, and that it will get authorisation at a European level based on the same standards of safety, quality and efficacy that we apply for every vaccine. And there's been a few, the questions on the data coming out in Israel and also in Scotland and in England. This is what we call real-world evidence, which helps us then to understand the timing of immunity and the real-world effect of the vaccines. We do regularly review this data. If we can provide updated communication on the vaccines based on the information coming from the real-world evidence, we will do so. And all I can say at this point is that the results coming from Israel, from Scotland, from England are very promising, and they're showing that the vaccine has the vaccines, because in fact in the UK, the vaccines, all at least 3 of the vaccines have been used, and all the predicted efficacy from clinical trials is being shown in real life. Sorry, I've just lost the thread of thought. Yeah, I think I was asked a question about Chinese vaccines. I think you're probably all aware that a number of Chinese vaccines have been developed. We're in discussions with a company representing one of the Chinese vaccines. It's the Sinopharm vaccine, and we hope we will be at a stage to also evaluate that vaccine as well. As I said before, we need every safe, effective and quality vaccine that we can that is available, so that we can meet the needs not only of the European population but of the global population. Is that it?
Okay. So thank you. Thank you, and good luck. I'm not going to say have a rest, because I think you won't have time, even if you might need some. So we count on you, as you know, from the very beginning. You count on you to provide us with a safe, effective authorization process, transparency on the data, ex ante, ex post, and we have been supporting EMA from the very beginning, and you can count on us to keep on doing so if the conditions, I would say, we put in our discussions are met. So thank you for that, Emer Cooke. Thank you to your teams that are working very, very hard. And I guess that we will have another opportunity to have additional discussion before the summer break in any case. So we close this agenda item with the EMA, and we move to the next one. The next one is the exchange of views with the Commission on the issue of exports of pesticides that have been banned in the EU, and the setting of maximum residue limits for pesticides banned in the EU. It's another kind of hot topic for farmers and consumers, and coordinators agreed on the request of the Greens to have this discussion with the Commission today, of course related to various files that are ongoing. I will now give the floor to Klaus Behrendt, as usual on these topics, from the Commission, and then Mr. Helbig. So the floor is yours. I guess you start, Mr. Behrendt, and then to your colleague.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Actually, the order in the agenda is the inverse, so it would be better if Mr. Helbig starts first.
Okay, good. It was not on my list. Sorry.